In today's Pipeline Pro webinar, we're talking about using emojis, or visual indicators, as we like to call them, in paperless pipeline. Emojis are the organization tool you didn't know you needed. They provide a simple and engaging way to categorize and identify information throughout pipeline. Here's a peek inside of an account that uses emojis pretty extensively to streamline their data inside pipeline. We'll get to more details about that later, but for now, it's essential to know that emojis are just text characters. They can be added anywhere in pipeline where you can add text using your emoji keyboard. Let's say, like you see in this account, we want to add a green circle emoji to the name of a transaction. To open your emoji keyboard in pipeline, right-click inside the transaction name field, then select emoji. Some operating systems may show a frequently used or recently used section here at the top for quick access. You can also navigate through the different categories at the bottom of the keyboard and scroll through to find it. Or you can scroll to the top of the keyboard and search for your emoji using text. Once you find the emoji you want to add, select it to add it to the text field. You can also use keyboard shortcuts to pull up your emoji keyboard. On Windows, press the Windows key and the period. On Mac, press Command, Control, and Space at the same time. Because emojis are just like any other piece of text, they can be used in transaction names, tasks, or any other area where text can be entered. Emojis are widely used by our customers throughout pipeline, and there are many benefits of using them within pipeline. Overall, emojis are an effective way to add an extra level of identification and classification to your pipeline account, which instantly improves your ability to keep track of your data. Not to mention, we hear often that the added organization our customers get from emojis just makes them happy, and that makes us happy. Even here at the help desk, we use emojis to track, categorize, and search through our conversations with all of you and different projects we're working on. We have our own systems for what different emojis mean. They allow us to clearly communicate with others and even ourselves within our internal systems and within our own pipeline accounts. In our support apps, I may use one of these emojis to represent a member of our team. And in more casual environments, I might use one of these. I love when I have an excuse to use Manta's cupcake emoji. As you start using emojis in your pipeline account, you'll quickly start to see the benefits too. As we move through different examples today, we're going to talk about a lot of the different benefits you'll get from emojis. But at the end of the day, remember that before everything else, at its core, the main benefit of using emojis in pipeline is all about organization. Emojis help organize and streamline your data to make things easier, cleaner, more succinct for your team, and that's always the goal. So to support that organization, emojis provide a quick visual reference amidst all the plain text. They help break up long blocks of text and add a touch of personality to your account. They allow lightning-fast communication, conveying a message more clearly and efficiently than words alone. For example, a simple checkmark emoji can indicate agreement or approval, while a red exclamation point can signal urgency. Not to mention, emojis really do make working in pipeline more engaging. They help to keep people interested and motivated, which can lead to increased productivity. And the benefits of emojis in paperless pipelines specifically is in their ability to be searched and saved. As soon as you add an emoji to a transaction or a task name, you can search using that emoji. This means you can quickly find relevant transactions and tasks just by searching for the emojis that you use. And since you can search by emojis, you can easily save those searches for quick access later. When you use emojis in pipeline, to make sure you reap all the benefits of emojis, it's important to keep a few things in mind. First, believe it or not, there is such a thing as too many emojis. Too many emojis can make your account look cluttered or even get confusing. Keep it simple and easy to understand. Use universally recognized emojis and avoid using too many of them. Keep it consistent and streamlined. Use the same emoji to represent the same type of information every single time. Today we'll cover the top 4 areas where you can use emojis: transaction names, tasks, more info and admin info on transactions, as well as homepage announcements. First, transaction names. Emojis pair really well with transaction names because the transaction name is highly visible and searchable throughout pipeline. The information you track with emojis is always front and center. There are a variety of ways to use emojis in transaction names. Let's look at a few examples. First, classifying transactions. Of course, to classify your transactions, we always first recommend using locations for your different offices, teams, or groups, and transaction labels for your different property types. But sometimes location and transaction label just aren't enough. If you need an additional layer of classification for your transactions, emojis can provide a third layer of classification that's always in your view when you're working on the transaction and throughout pipeline. For example, some offices have different transaction coordinators, and they may use emojis to represent the different TCs responsible for a specific transaction. Using this method, I can easily identify that on this South Lake Avenue transaction, Frank is the TC. Another example of classifying transactions, some offices represent buyers and sellers across different states, and they may use emojis to represent the state a property is in. Using this method, I can easily identify that this Grant Avenue transaction is in Georgia. When you use emojis to classify your transactions, we recommend entering the emoji at the beginning of the transaction name like this. Using the TC example from earlier, let's say we want to identify a transaction as TC Franks with the green circle emoji. When you're adding or editing a transaction, you can simply enter the emoji at the beginning of the transaction name, again by right-clicking, then selecting emoji and choosing your emoji. Once you start adding emojis to classify your transactions, you'll be able to easily search for them. For the most precise search, we recommend using Power Search by transaction name. To do that, click Power Search in the upper right corner, select Name at the top, and then enter your emoji. If you find it easier than pulling up your keyboard, you can even copy it from a transaction, like you see here, and paste it into the search field. Some people just prefer this if there's an emoji easy to locate nearby. It's a little bit faster than pulling up your emoji keyboard. Or if you've already searched by this emoji recently, you can toggle to your recent searches and pull it from there. Once you've run your search, if you're using the green emoji for Frank the TC, you'll have a full list of Frank's transactions. And from here, you can save Frank's transactions as a shortcut, so you can instantly access it later. Click Add Shortcut at the top of the page, choose an icon, name your shortcut, let's say Frank's transactions, and then save it. Once the shortcut is saved, you'll see Frank's transactions in your My Shortcuts menu on the left. And now, from the home page and most other pages in Pipeline, you can instantly access a list of Frank's transactions. And from the task page, you can search and save tasks from Frank's transactions specifically. Just click Search at the top of the page and enter the emoji you're searching by. And now you'll have a full list of tasks on Frank's transactions. And from here, you can save Frank's tasks as a shortcut, just like we did earlier by clicking Add Shortcut at the top of the page. As you can see, I've already added a shortcut for Frank's tasks here. Another way to use emojis in transaction names is as an alternative way to track a transaction's progress. Of course, to track a transaction's progress, we always recommend using transaction statuses as well as checklist tasks, but sometimes the information you need goes beyond the scope of statuses and tasks. For example, some offices need to track different phases of their internal processes, like their internal review process, and they may use emojis to represent the different stages within the process. Using this method, I can easily identify that the Oxford Street transaction here has been reviewed and approved. Now, as I mentioned, you typically use a status for this, like say closed, reviewed, to represent your reviewed transactions, but some offices just prefer the additional visual indicator they get from using emojis this way. When you use emojis to track your transaction's progress, we recommend entering the emoji at the end of the transaction name, like you see with the checkbox here. Using the review process example, let's say we want to identify a transaction as having been reviewed. You could edit the transaction and simply enter the emoji at the end of the transaction name. And once you start doing that, you'll be able to search for it. Click Power Search in the upper right corner, select Name at the top, then enter the emoji, and search. Now you'll have a full list of your reviewed transactions. If you want from here, you can even take it a step further by searching only for active transactions. From the blue search menu at the top, click the drop down for status, then scroll down to the bottom and select all active. Now you'll have a full list of all of your active transactions that have been reviewed. And from here, you can save them as a shortcut. Click Add Shortcut at the top of the page, choose an icon, name your shortcut, then save it. Another useful way to use emojis in Pipeline is to pin or flag transactions. Let's say you're working with a particular group of transactions that don't necessarily have any other factors in common, and you have the need to easily access those transactions later. You can use emojis to earmark a set of transactions for yourself or to share them with someone else in your Pipeline account. To earmark a transaction, you can add emojis to represent your pin or flag. Using this method, I can easily identify that this Hawthorne Lane transaction has been pinned. When you use emojis to pin transactions, we recommend entering the emoji at the end of the transaction name, like you see here with the red pin emoji. Let's say you want to pin or earmark a transaction for later. You can edit the transaction, then simply enter the emoji at the end of the transaction name. Once you start pinning transactions with emojis, you guessed it, you can easily search for and save them like we've talked about. But if you want to take it a step further and share a list of your pinned transactions with someone else in your account, once you've searched for the pinned transactions, you can simply copy the unique URL at the top of your search results page, then shoot it over to them as a link in a message. When someone else on your Pipeline account clicks on the link, they'll be taken to a list of the pinned transactions they have visibility to view. And this is the same with any search results across Pipeline. You can easily share the URL with someone else on your team. If you decide to use emojis in transaction names, there are a couple of caveats to keep in mind. First, the transaction name automatically appears in the subject of emails sent from Pipeline. That means the emojis you use in your transaction names will appear in your sent emails like you see here for 5 Valley View Road with the purple circle emoji. If desired to hide the emoji, you can suppress the transaction name from the subject of the message by adding a pipe character at the beginning of your email subject. The pipe character shares the backslash key on your keyboard, so to add a pipe character, you can press Shift and backslash. This way, when you suppress the transaction name from messages, they'll appear like this. And the final caveat is that when you run transaction reports in some versions of Excel, the emojis you use in your transaction names may appear in grayscale like you see here. While the colors don't appear as normal, you can still differentiate between the different types of emojis. Now, on to the second area in Pipeline where you can use emojis. Tasks. You can also use emojis in your task names. Using emojis in your tasks makes them easy to find on transactions and on the task page. And like transactions, they're easy to search and save as a shortcut for later. There are a couple different ways to use emojis in tasks. First, prioritizing tasks. If you have certain high priority tasks that you'd always like to stay top of mind, emojis can provide an instant indicator of a task priority level. For example, some offices like to prioritize certain tasks as high priority or urgent, and they may use different emojis to represent their urgency. Using this method, I can quickly see that on this checklist, the order photography task is high priority. Another useful way to use emojis in tasks is to differentiate task type. If it's important for you to quickly discern the type of a task on your checklist, emojis can provide quick visual identification. For example, some offices like to identify an important task's type, and they may use different emojis to represent the type of a task. Using this method, I can quickly identify the 3 photography-related tasks in this listing checklist. When you use emojis in your task to keep the clutter down, we recommend remembering that emojis are best used in tasks to help them be more prominent and eye-catching. So you wouldn't want to use emojis in all your tasks. Instead, use them sparingly, only on certain special tasks you want to stand out from the rest. Also, in cases where you can, we recommend adding emojis to tasks on their checklist templates instead of entering them on the transaction each time. That way, the organization you get from emojis in tasks will be completely hands-free. Using the examples we talked about, let's say we use the red flag emoji to represent high priority tasks, and we want to find all the overdue and upcoming tasks that are high priority. From the task page, click Search and enter the red flag emoji. Now, you'll have a full list of your high priority tasks. Or let's say we want to find all the tasks that are photography related. Then we can enter the camera emoji in search. I'm going to type it in to search for it here. And now you'll have a full list of your photography-related tasks. And as I'm sure you know by now, you can save these task searches as a shortcut to access them quickly later by clicking Add Shortcut at the top of the page. The next area where you can use emojis, the More Info and Admin Info section. In the Transactions More Info and Admin Info sections, emojis help the information you're looking for really stand out on the transaction. And you can even power search by More Info and Admin Info to pull up transactions based on the emojis you use there. There are a few different ways to use emojis in More Info and Admin Info. First, emojis can act as the options for the custom information you collect on transactions. For example, you could use 1, 2, or 3 as your different agent service plan options, or green or red emojis for yes and no, respectively. Using this method, I can quickly identify, without having to look through large amounts of text, that the agent service plan is 2. They would like to send a survey to the seller but not the buyer, and the financing type is loan. When you use emojis as options in More Info or Admin Info on transactions, you can easily search by your different emoji options to pull up a list of transactions where that option was chosen. Using the examples we've talked about, let's say you're tracking your agent service plans in the More Info section of their transactions, and you want to find all the transactions where an agent is on the Tier 2 service plan. Click Power Search in the upper right, select Info for More Info, then enter the To emoji, and search. Now you'll have a full list of transactions with agents on the Tier 2 plan. And from here, as I know you're guessing by now, you can save the list as a shortcut to quickly retrieve the same list later. Second, emojis can act as icons for the custom information you collect on transactions. For example, you may use a lock emoji for the lockbox number, or this bank emoji for the name of the bank. Using this method, my eye is quickly drawn here to, say, the lockbox number or the earnest money payments or whatever I'm looking for. Once I'm familiar with the emojis used by my company, I can find whatever I'm looking for in a flash. And just a small word of caution, when you use emojis here in More Info or Admin Info, we recommend using emojis as either options or icons and not both. So you should pick one method and stick to it to reduce clutter and any potential confusion. Third, emojis can offer additional formatting options that you can't get from plain text alone. For example, you could add small circles for bullets or horizontal lines or triangles to help emphasize different areas within your More Info and Admin Info sections. Using this method, I can make a few updates to my More Info section and get even better segmenting of the information to help really draw my eye to exactly what I'm looking for. And last, you can also use the More Info and Admin Info sections as another way to pin or flag transactions. Say you don't need the visibility that you get from pinning in the transaction name. Instead, you just need the ability to quickly pull up a list of your pinned transactions. Then you could place a pin on the transactions More Info or Admin Info, and since you can search by More Info and Admin Info, your pinned transactions will always be at your fingertips. For example, you may add a red flag or red pin emoji to symbolize a pin or flag transaction. Using this method, I can add a pin red flag emoji to certain transactions so that I can easily access it later. And from there, you guessed it, I can search for my pinned transactions using Power Search, even save them as a shortcut to access later, and also share the URL of my search results with someone else on my team. A quick note, it may be nice to know that all of the different emoji options we've discussed for More Info and Admin Info can also be used in the commission summary of transactions. So just keep in mind that that field is not searchable and only commission module customers can set a default value for it. Another great use of emojis in Pipeline is homepage announcements. One of our favorite uses for emojis and announcements is to guide your agents through your workflow by adding number emojis. For example, as you can see here, agents are being guided to add a transaction, upload their docs, then check off tasks. There are a few other ways to use emojis within your homepage announcements that were mentioned in a previous Pipeline Pro webinar. It was called Creative Ways to Use Announcements. In that webinar, Monta shared several great options for informing, directing, and educating your team with homepage announcements, including different ways to use emojis within them. If you didn't make it to that one, we highly recommend checking that previous webinar out on our help site. Now, it's time to get started with emojis in your account. As you're getting started, the most important step in using emojis is to develop a clear and strong system. To develop an emoji system, first decide where you want to use emojis and how you want to use them. Second, identify each emoji you plan to use and what they will represent. Third, create a key for your emojis. And even better, upload it to reference docs. Here's an example of an emoji key you may create to keep track of your emoji system. Once you create a key like this, you can save it as a PDF and upload it to your reference docs library so that everyone in your account can be on the same page when it comes to how you use emojis. As we've talked about, emojis can be used anywhere in Pipeline where text can be entered. Undoubtedly, you'll find useful places to use emojis that we didn't cover today. Feel free to experiment. I would say that's it for using emojis in Pipeline, but this is really just the start. Now it's time for you to develop your own system for emojis and start taking advantage of them.